I started noticing my first symptom 4 months after I had my last child. My thumb would twitch on and off, but it was not consistent. I also would have some shoulder pain and mood changes.
In the year 2000, we moved to Los Angeles, and we started doing some hiking in the mountains. And it was one New Year's morning. She goes, "Do you hear that?" I'm like, "Hear what?" She goes, "You're not lifting your feet."
As a professional violinist, people would notice before me going on stage that my hands were shaking. And they would ask me, "Hey, am I nervous?" And I would say not at all. And that's when I started realizing, hey, why am I shaking?
I was having trouble driving at nighttime. I would go, to the hospital on call in the middle of the night, and I could not judge distance. I was always like, how far is that car?
Tripping and falling at Huntington Beach. And that was 2011. Mary Paul said, "Hey, we need to go see somebody. Why don't you make an appointment and go see a neurologist?"
During my pregnancy, I first started noticing that I had what I thought was carpal tunnel. My right hand wouldn't move very well.
The first day of my ski lesson, I had like a tremor in my hand, but at first I thought it was nerves.
I started to get a bit worried, so I went to see the doctor, and the doctor told me, "Don't worry about it. It's just essential tremors. You have nothing to worry about." He was wrong.
And I demonstrated the finger tapping, and he looked very alarmed.
I was working in the ER, and I noticed that my foot was either dragging or I would be tripping over it.
She said, "Maria, this is in your brain, but not like you think. You have Parkinson's."
After 5 minutes, I'm not joking, after 5 minutes, this guy told me I had Parkinson's disease. One of the worst prognoses I could ever get, and I got it in 5 minutes. Not even a blood sample was taken.
As I was sitting in the waiting room, there was a poster on how to determine if someone has Parkinson's. And I went down that, and 6 out of 8 I had already, and the other ones were soon to come. The doctor came in and said, "How can I help you?" I said, "I have Parkinson's."
I was diagnosed at 20 years old.
Now I have a diagnosis, so you would think that after 5 years, I would be like, oh my gosh, like I finally have a diagnosis and I'm gonna feel better and I'm gonna do all of this, but that's just not how I reacted to that. I kind of went into self-destruction mode.
I didn't know what it meant. I didn't know if I was gonna die. I didn't know if I was gonna be of any use to my industry anymore. Like, was I gonna get fired from my job? Like, how does that work? What happens now? Like, all of our plans that we had just seemed to go poof.
The day that I got my diagnosis, I remember feeling very calm. I wasn't anxious. I wasn't scared. I wasn't happy or elated, but I was calm.
My reaction upon being diagnosed and told right there by my movement disorder specialist was a sense of relief. I knew what it was. It was definitely Parkinson's. It wasn't 6 other things. I knew what I had, and I could prepare myself for that.
It's hard to find meaning if life lets you down, and you're left screaming but can't make a sound, and no one's around. Yeah. But the night is darkest right before dawn. Almost there, I promise. Just keep holding on. Yeah, keep holding on. 'Cause there are better days to come. All the pressure fades and the fighting is done. There are better days. There are better days to come, and you'll smile again, 'cause the pain will be gone. There are better days to come. There are better days to come, and you'll smile again, 'cause the pain will be gone. There are better days.
What is Parkinson's disease? Well, that's a question that can be answered in a variety of ways. The easiest way perhaps to start is to say, how does Parkinson's look like? Most people equate Parkinson's with a so-called motor disease. Difficulties with movement, the slowness, the stiffness, the tremor, changes in walking, changes in balance and posture. And that's definitely part of Parkinson's. James Parkinson recognized this already on the street, individuals in 1817. That's how visible and recognizable Parkinson's is. But if you speak to people with Parkinson's, they will tell you that there is a part that is under the surface, just like the largest part of the iceberg, which is less visible to the outside, but which is devastating to people with Parkinson's, and it's very common, and these are the so-called non-motor problems.
I also got fatigue and slowness of thinking.
Changes in mood, depression, slowness in thinking, difficulties planning, urinary incontinence, slowed bowel movements, disturbed sleep, inability to smell well, and the list goes on and on.
Am I crazy? Like, is there, like, am I making this up? Like, I know I don't feel good, but nobody believes me.
If you look at what happens in the brain, most people equate Parkinson's with a lesion in the so-called substantia nigra, the black matter. If you visualize the brain as a mushroom, in the stem of the mushroom, in the top is an area called the substantia nigra. It creates dopamine. Those cells die off at an accelerated pace, causing a lack of dopamine in the brain, and indeed a lack of dopamine is causing many, although not all of the symptoms of Parkinson's disease. So what can we do about this? Well, first of all, we need to create a healthier living environment. Get rid of toxic pesticides and other suspicious chemicals. Protect farmers from exposure. Protect those living in the vicinity of farmland from exposure. Washing your vegetables and fruit very carefully. Resort to biological alternatives if possible. Eat biological if you can afford it.
Mediterranean diet's the best diet. Sleep, get plenty of sleep. Don't wake up to an alarm. Wake up whenever you want to wake up.
We know that certain habits are associated with a lower risk of developing Parkinson's. Regular exercise, drinking a few cups of coffee, avoiding excessive dairy intake, are measures that you can take yourself today in the hope of lowering the risk of developing Parkinson's disease. And at the same time, the reality is that there are currently some 10 million people affected by this debilitating disease across the globe.
Parkinson's is the world's fastest growing brain disease. We need to better understand what its causes are so we can prevent it. Numerous environmental factors have been tied to the condition, including certain pesticides, many of which are nerve toxins. For those who already have Parkinson's disease, whether you're one of the 1.2 million Americans with the disease or the up to 10 million people worldwide with the disease, most effective medication for Parkinson's disease is now over 50 years old.
Develop better symptomatic treatments, multidisciplinary care, better access to care. Hopefully one day we will develop medications that can slow down or stop the progression of Parkinson's, and who knows, ultimately the dream of everyone, a cure.
2 centuries of Parkinson's disease is enough. 1.2 million Americans with the disease is too many. 10 million people around the world with Parkinson's disease is way too many. 200 people being diagnosed with the condition in the United States today is too many. 100 dying with the condition today is too many.
My experience in the military spans about 26 years. It's active and reserve combined. I started in Camp Lejeune in the early 80s. It was about 1984 to 88. I was living right there on base around the corner from where I worked, which was the Navy hospital. And I worked in the basement at the hospital because I was a dietitian and a food service director.
I was a phys ed major in college, so I wanted to be a diver in the military. And so I became a salvage diver. I was a salvage diver for about 16 years. And then I went into ordnance logistics, or ammunition, bullets, all the way up to smart weapons.
I got in air traffic back in 1979. I checked out on radar. 2 weeks later was the strike in 1981. Well, we all got fired. So I looked into taking the postal test.
Living on Camp Lejeune on the base was wonderful. I worked there, I lived there, I had my first child there, and it's no surprise that I lived in an area called Paradise Point. It was beautiful. We had a golf course there. I could jog at lunchtime, for instance, and jog home or go to the dock, and at the time I would swim. It's a community. It's a nice little, like Beaver Cleaver back in the 50s, 60s American dream lifestyle.
The Agency for Toxic Substances and Disease Registry estimates as many as 1 million military and civilian staff and their families might have been exposed to the contaminated drinking water.
When I was in Lejeune the first time in the late 80s, there was a problem with the water, but I was oblivious to it, quite frankly. I was new and young into the military. I was drinking the water. I was working in a place where I was drinking the water all day, bathing in it, swimming in it.
The Gulf War was, the first Gulf War was the war I was in. Doing salvage work in a harbor where we were covered with the smoke from the burning oil rigs. It would not turn morning until 10 o'clock.
While working and living in Erie, Pennsylvania, we had used a lawn service company. ChemLawn was the name of the company, and like my wife says, you'd think by the name we would have recognized that we probably shouldn't be using this.
In 2017, I had some cognitive issues. I wasn't able to stay on task and finish sentences sometimes, and I was distraught, I was nervous.
Loss of hearing, loss of smell, all these things, constipation.
All little things just started cropping up here and there. I had mentioned to my wife that, it seems like I have to give my left arm an additional command to when I'm reaching for something. My wife said, time out. Let's go over every small detail that seems to be coming to your mind.
And that's when the neurologist said, hey, after 5 minutes, I'm not joking, after 5 minutes, this guy told me I had Parkinson's disease. One of the worst prognoses I could ever get, and I got it in 5 minutes. Not even a blood sample was taken.
By the time I saw a neurologist, I was diagnosed very quickly.
And said, I believe you have Parkinson's disease. Find out years later that one of the chemicals they use in lawn treatment triggers Parkinson's disease.
My exposure was constant. It was difficult to ascertain as to whether it was doing anything to my body, but I think it did. In fact, I know it did.
I learned that the Camp Lejeune waters contained TCE, which most likely contributed to my Parkinson's diagnosis.
Dr. Ray Dorsey, a neurologist and co-author of the book Ending Parkinson's Disease, says TCE, one of the chemicals found in the water at Camp Lejeune, is known to cause health problems.
And TCE increases your risk of Parkinson's disease by 500%, contaminates up to 30% of groundwater in the United States, and we think it's a major contributor to the rise of Parkinson's. And the Marines knew about it, and they didn't do anything. They covered up the contamination that was affecting their own members of their own community for uncertain reasons.
And upon that realization, I was in disbelief,
I started to cry. All I saw was my future in a wheelchair, slumped over, drooling, with my wife pushing me.
This was the worst possible card I could have been dealt, is what Jim said. I could already see my future crumble, see myself being pushed around in a wheelchair by my wife, drooling.
Mr. Geiser suggested that pesticides may have played a role in why he has Parkinson's disease. We need to develop assays or means for testing to see if that's indeed the case. And then 2, to take action to prevent people from ever developing this disease.
I think it's highly important to reduce the amount of chemicals that are in our environment and the use of those chemicals.
We, with the disease, need to make our voices heard, just like with Mothers Against Drunk Driving, or those that had HIV or breast cancer, for instance. And I would encourage anyone in the community to make sure that their legislatures, their elected officials know that this is not right. This is not okay to use these products anymore. People are suffering. So I think that we need to get a grassroots approach and follow the steps to make sure that our voices are heard so we can change the tide against Parkinson's.
Veterans like Captain Lindbergh are at increased risk for developing Parkinson's disease, and they're at increased risk for at least 3 reasons. The first is that many, including the late General Colin Powell, were exposed to pesticides like Agent Orange that increase their risk for Parkinson's disease. The second is that many veterans are exposed to chemicals like trichloroethylene. Trichloroethylene, or TCE, was a widely used degreasing agent by the military and a wide range of civilian occupations as well. And the third reason veterans are at increased risk for Parkinson's disease is that they're more susceptible to head trauma. I think about 8 million veterans have experienced a traumatic brain injury, and these traumatic brain injuries increase the individual's risk for Parkinson's disease.
The story of Jim and Mary Paul is clear. This disease doesn't just hit the affected individual, it affects everyone around you, your spouse, your friends, your family, your children.
We do not sleep in the same room for 2 reasons. About 3 years ago, Jim was not sleeping well. He was not being honest with me in that he was starting to hallucinate. And if you're sleeping with someone that has Parkinson's and they're hallucinating, you get kicked and punched. I was afraid to sleep in the same room with him because during the hallucinations, he did not know who I was. So it was just a terrifying experience to go through because you know it's not him, it's the Parkinson's. But it's a good thing I'm brave. It takes brave people to deal with Parkinson's.
And these same near ones can play a crucial role in the overall management of Parkinson's. Jim literally says, without Mary Paul,
I know I would be in a psychiatric ward. She really has been my guiding light throughout all of this. She's my wife, my caregiver, my protector. She does it all. It's amazing to me. I'll say, Mary Paul, you need help with that? And she'll say, no, go exercise or do something that can help you with your disease.
I recognize this from my own daily clinical practice, where I see beautiful examples like this couple who support each other to the best of their abilities, so that despite all the challenges that come with Parkinson's, people can lead as good as possible a meaningful life despite Parkinson's disease.
I lost the ability to braid my daughter's afro coily kinky hair. I lost the ability to make certain foods that I grew up eating in West Africa that required a certain amount of dexterity to knead.
In everyday life, I have to think about everything what I do and make choices like this or that, because after I will be very tired, so I can't do that anymore, so very difficult. Hi, I'm Nikita, I'm 24 years old and I have Parkinson's. I was diagnosed at 20 years old.
I'm Larry Gifford. I was 45 years old when I was diagnosed, but I started feeling the symptoms much earlier. But let me take you back. I was born in Westerville, Ohio, the quiet, peaceful village just north of Columbus, Ohio, the state capital. Well, Westerville is a place where the Giffords have been for many generations. In fact, I think we go back 4 generations to Otterbein College, which is in Westerville, including myself. That's where I graduated from, and I learned how to do radio.
Hello, my name is Amasala Thomas. I was born and raised in Lagos, Nigeria. Grew up pretty normal childhood. I lived there until I was about 20, and then we moved to the US. Then I moved to the US to further my education.
Radio has been my passion. I've been doing it for more than 30 years. I was on the air for a while, and now I'm the National Director of Talk Radio for a company in Canada called Chorus. Next stop was Dayton, Ohio, where I was doing radio, and then I moved on to Philadelphia. And that's where I met my wife, Rebecca. We've been married for 22 years.
I was on a ski holiday with my mother in Austria, and the first day of my ski lesson, I had like a tremor in my hand. But at first I thought it was nerves because of my first ski lesson.
I was 29 years old, and we were living in the US at the time, my husband, myself. It was a slight twitch in the forefinger on my right hand. And I thought it was just due to stress. I didn't pay too much attention to it. There was quite a lot of things going on in my life at the time. There was a wedding, I was working as an engineer, I had the kids and family obligations.
In the year 2000, we moved to Los Angeles, and we started doing some hiking in the mountains. And it was one New Year's morning, she goes, "Do you hear that?" I'm like, "Hear what?" She goes, "You're not lifting your feet." I'm like, "What do you mean?" She goes, "I'm trying to enjoy the peacefulness here, yet it's clomp, drag, clomp, drag. Can you just pick up your feet?"
Fast forward a couple months later, the tremors didn't stop. In fact, the twitch didn't stop. It got worse, and it started affecting more than one finger, and it started affecting more than one hand.
Since the holiday, my symptoms were getting worse. I had trouble with tying up my buttons.
I was talking to my son, and I was handing him a glass of water like this, and it was shaking like that, but it was spilling over the sides. And he goes, "Dad, why are you shaking so bad?" I'm like, "I don't know." And he goes, "Shouldn't you see a doctor?"
And the doctor told me, "Don't worry about it. It's just essential tremors. You have nothing to worry about." He was wrong.
So then I went to the neurologist, and then I started very early with levodopa. That was like a life-changing moment because all my tremors were gone. So that was like, yeah, this is Parkinson's. At first I thought like, how could that be? And I went home and I thought, let me just go for a walk or just go biking a lot of kilometers.
My wife wasn't with me at that appointment, so I left the wellness center and I called her. I said, "Well, he said the good news is I don't have MS, but he thinks I have Parkinson's." And we just were kind of silent on the phone, and I started crying. I didn't know what it meant. I didn't know if I was going to die. I didn't know if I was going to be of any use to my industry anymore. Like, was I going to get fired from my job? Like, how does that work? What happens now? Like, all of our plans that we had just seemed to like go poof. I mean, it took the air out of not just the room, it took the air out of my world.
And I remember leaving the doctor's office and feeling very, very determined. I think that's the word. I felt determined.
When she heard the diagnosis, she must have been devastated, but at the same time, you can hear in her words that there was a sense of relief, because now she knew the name of the beast, so she could start the fight with the beast. And in her case, she decided to become an ambassador in the fight against Parkinson's, but in particular for her fellow patients in Africa.
As a Black person, specifically as an African with Parkinson's disease, I didn't feel like there were enough resources, there were enough services for me. I didn't know many other people who look like me who had the illness. There are the unique challenges that I face as an African that my British or American counterparts don't face. And I'm not saying that my challenges were more difficult. They were just different.
If you are 20 like me when I was diagnosed, you're in a really active life with a lot of things, but also growing as a person. And if you are a bit older, you already had a lot of things done in life, working and stuff. And at 20, you're just at the beginning of being an adult and discovering the world.
A diagnosis of Parkinson's at such a young age interferes with your future, with your perspectives.
I'm currently not working anymore because of the Parkinson's. I had like many friends, and I went to school and did a lot of sports. I really love to dance and hockey, so I was very active in life.
And what Nikita is describing so wonderfully is how she still needs to grow as a person. You are not ready as a 21-year-old. I'm not saying that a 60 or a 70-year-old is ready, but if you're 20, you still need to develop and mature as a person. And now you've got this diagnosis of Parkinson's. It's important to realize that Parkinson's is not a disease of elderly people.
I really want to change the fact of Parkinson's is an old people disease, and that's what I really want to change, and that's where my energy goes to. So yeah, that's my new goal in life since I have Parkinson's.
I'm listening to some podcasts, and I'm listening to the Michael J. Fox Foundation podcast, and I hear this voice, and it's Ray Dorsey, Dr. Ray Dorsey from Rochester. I'll never forget it. And he's like, listen, if people with Parkinson's don't start sharing their stories, we will never raise enough attention to raise enough money to do enough research to do anything with Parkinson's, let alone cure it. And I thought, oh my God, there it is. I'm a storyteller. I've been a storyteller all my life. Here I am in Canada with a national platform. We've got radio stations, TV stations, websites, and I'm sitting here sulking. How can I expect anybody else to tell their story if I'm not willing to tell mine?
Trying to network with other Africans impacted by Parkinson's disease. I got connected with people in Cameroon, in Kenya, Uganda, Ghana, South Africa, Ethiopia. I thought about making Parkinson's Africa a platform where all the different African support organizations come together, unify our voices by creating print, audio, and digital material, educational materials. We're working with different foundations to help improve access to medication.
Poverty, access to care, differences in cultural status, racial status, socioeconomic status. We should take care of everyone with Parkinson's in the world, and Omotola is an inspirational leader in this regard.
When it was World Parkinson's Day in the Netherlands, the Parkinson's TV asked everyone to make a little short movie of themselves and just tell something about themselves, and that was the first thing I did. And after that I became very active with Make Parkinson's More Public.
And so that's when I started the podcast, When Life Gives You Parkinson's. And that podcast, we're now in our 4th season, but it led to me going to the World Parkinson Congress in Kyoto. And while I was there, I realized I was not alone. And we show up in this room, and there's like 70 people that are YOPD, that are like around my age. I've never been in a room with a couple of them, let alone 70 of them. And I thought, holy crap, we can do something. We've got leverage here. These are 70 people that are already saying, I'm an advocate for Parkinson's, or they wouldn't be at the conference. So that's when we really started to say, let's do something. And it was the next spring, right as the pandemic of COVID was starting, that the book, Ending Parkinson's Disease, came out by Dr. Ray Dorsey and his colleagues. And we latched onto that. And a lot of us got together on Zoom and we started talking about the book. And they're like, hey, it's a prescription for action. You guys gonna do anything? I'm like, oh man, Ray always gets me into these things. Yeah, okay, we'll do something. And that's when we launched PD Avengers.
If you want to know who's going to change the future of Parkinson's disease, you just met him. Mr. Gifford has a great gift, and that gift is storytelling. But we all have gifts, you and me, and we need to apply those gifts to preventing and ending Parkinson's disease.
When I was studying biology, neurobiology at Penn, one of the doctors there had an interest and passion for Parkinson's, and that started me really getting, excited about the brain and doing surgery. So right then and there, I was a sophomore. I told Mom, I'm going to be a doctor. Of course, she stopped asking me, what am I going to do the rest of my life? Being a Parkinson's doctor, which is kind of, ironic, I was doing the usual tests for my patients, finger to finger tapping, opening your hands and walking tandem. All of a sudden, I could not do those things. I was looking at myself more than the patients going like, I can't do that. I can't open my hand.
I'm very, very fortunate where I live. We're right on the shores of Owasco Lake. We have walking paths over at the park. It's inspiring because you're not on the streets. You're not getting the carbon dioxide from the cars going by. And it's quiet and it's serene.
I grew up in Jamestown, New York. I lived there all the way until I was 26 years old, and I was very family oriented. I grew up in a big Italian family. Went to college at St. Bonaventure University, a master's degree in education and special education and literacy.
My grandmother, who lived in Mexico, she fell and broke her ankle, and so she came to the States to see us, and one look at her and I knew she had Parkinson's. And so that started a whole personal journey for me with Parkinson's.
My brother was diagnosed with Parkinson's probably 7.5 years ago. One time when he was coming into my mother's through the garage, for some reason he missed a step and he ended up on his back. Flat on his back. He was going to the VA and they were saying, you're just old, there's nothing wrong with you, you don't have any issues that your family says you do. You are just getting old. And we made him stay here and go to the doctor and find out if it was Parkinson's or not. And of course, it ended up being true that he was being diagnosed with Parkinson's.
With Ms. Allen, she had the role of a caregiver. She cared for her brother who had Parkinson's disease. She, like 35 million Americans, care for an adult. And the number one reason for caregivers in the United States is neurological disorders like Parkinson's and Alzheimer's.
I started noticing my first symptom 4 months after I had my last child. My thumb would twitch on and off, but it was not consistent. I also would have some shoulder pain and mood changes. I was noticing in the car 2 different minor little collisions in the car because I could not brake.
I was working in the ER, mostly nights, and I noticed that my foot was either dragging or I would be tripping over it. And I thought, what the heck is going on?
The radiologist at the ER had told me that I had a cyst in my brain that he thought was potentially causing a simple partial seizure.
So I was able to get right in with my internal medicine. He says, I'm pretty sure you have Parkinson's. So I was petrified I was going to start going as bad as my brother, as quickly as my brother did.
So finally, after 2 years of going to every doctor imaginable, Dr. Shees, who was my really good friend and who's also was my mentor, she said, Maria, this is in your brain, but not like you think. You have Parkinson's. And I was like, thank God. I still know my neurology. I knew something was wrong with me. I'm not crazy. But then was like, what about the pain and what about the vision? I started noticing that the medicines made my cycle worse. And then in turn, my cycle made my symptoms worse. And then I started thinking, and I saw this definition of a diva that said that doing extraordinary things with the normal capabilities, And so I thought, yes, those Parkinson patients, they're doing extraordinary things with the limited capabilities they have. So that's what started me wanting to write about women. And I wrote about the Parkinson's diva, and that's the book that started this whole movement of women in PD.
Being young, being female, and having no family history for myself, makes me very rare, and it makes doctors not even have Parkinson's in their radar probably when they first look at me and diagnose me. We're almost like a subgroup, right? We have a lot more non-motor symptoms than we do physical symptoms, and so we don't present the same in the office. We're still raising our kids, we're just starting jobs, we're 5-10 years into our career, this is supposed to be prime time with all of this diagnosis and not knowing what's going on. I mean, 5 years is a long time.
A person who develops Parkinson's at a young age. We reserve that term for people who develop Parkinson's under the age of 50. Rachel was just 33 when the diagnosis was made. Her symptoms started way earlier. She received multiple diagnoses before ultimately the right diagnosis was being made. And Parkinson's is growing. It's growing fast, and it means that there will also be more younger people with Parkinson's. So programs tailored to the unique needs and services that are necessary to support people with young onset Parkinson's are really deeply needed.
My neurologist ended up moving out of town. So I didn't have a neurologist, and I was looking for someone, and I got a call from Strong Memorial. They introduced me to Dr. Tiroli, and I had a visit with him the next week, virtually, and it went really well. He had me walk, and he had me swinging my arms, from the computer down the hall, and it went really well. It was like everything that I was used to seeing done in the office, but I was doing it at my home, and I didn't have to go out.
Ms. Allen lives in a relatively small town in upstate New York, and most neurologists and most Parkinson specialists unfortunately aren't located in small towns. And so one of the great beauties of telemedicine and teleeducation is that you can bring education, or in this case, bring care to patients instead of asking patients to go seek care themselves. Although my colleagues and I have been using telemedicine to care for patients for 15 years, it really wasn't widely adopted until the COVID-19 pandemic, when Medicare changed its rules in the United States and started covering telemedicine, one, into the home, and two, to people regardless of where they live. We need to make sure that Congress, upcoming Congress, enacts legislation to make this temporary coverage of telemedicine permanent so that anyone, anywhere can receive the care that they need.
My children, fortunately and unfortunately, kind of don't know mom any different, especially my youngest one. Mommy, why does your toe sometimes stick up in the air? And I'll tell them, well, I have dystonia too with Parkinson's, and sometimes that's what happens. Does it hurt? Yeah, sometimes. My older one has said, well, I'm gonna make a medicine when I grow up because I don't want people's big toes to stick up.
I would say get better soon, and I will help you find a medicine soon so you can feel better.
They were very bothered when I had to stop working because I was working at their school. And I struggled with that too, because I want to be an example of a working mom, but I've had to very much so reiterate to them the importance of self-care and how if I'm not taking care of myself, I can't take care of them.
The need that we still have, even in this country, for access to care, for affordable care. There's so many patients that, despite all the great strides that we made in the last 20 years and all the new medications we got and the new tools, there's still only a subgroup of people that are taking advantage of those new diagnoses and new treatments, new tools. With patients with asthma, like for instance, say that, 9 out of 10 times I was on that medicine, it was great, but I had to stop it because it was so expensive.
Access to care is difficult for all individuals, even for physicians. Dr. De Leon, as a neurologist, struggled to get appropriate diagnosis and appropriate care for her own Parkinson's disease, even though she's written 2 books on the disease and cared for hundreds and likely thousands of people with Parkinson's disease. You need to be a fierce advocate or have a fierce advocate on your side, whether that's a caregiver, a spouse, a friend. You need not suffer in silence. You need to make your voices heard. And if people aren't listening to you, find other clinicians or others that can provide you the care and support that you need.
In terms of me being at a disadvantage with Parkinson's, to be able to play at competitions where I'm playing against healthy, able-bodied athletes, half my age and 10 times my speed, much faster. How do I deal with that and not get discouraged? Well, it's the realization that I'm not playing to win. I'm not playing to lose. Because the moment I step up to that table, I have already won.
Hi, I'm Becca Miller. I'm an associate professor at the Yale University School of Medicine in the Department of Psychiatry. I'm a single mom with a 9-year-old daughter, and I live in New Haven, Connecticut. My life was pretty normal, average suburban life until second grade when my dad switched jobs and started working for Chase Manhattan Bank and moved our family to Liberia, West Africa for 1.5 years. And that really gave me a much different perspective on the world that we live in after getting back.
My experience in the military started, I went to the Naval Academy. Then I graduated from the Naval Academy, I went into submarines, weapons officer. We went through a patrol and then 2 years in the shipyard.
My name is Naveen P. Kumar. I was born with a very rare heart condition that has resulted in many open heart surgeries, mechanical heart and pacemaker. I am a movie actor who has acted in several movies as well as served as an executive producer. I am nicknamed the Bionic Man in the table tennis world because of my mechanical and electronic implants.
I went to graduate school at LIU Brooklyn and was working on my clinical psychology PhD. You know, during that time, I had been dating, I had been looking for a partner, and had never managed to find someone that I really wanted to have a relationship with. But I knew that I really wanted kids. So when I was 37, I decided to start trying to have a kid on my own with the donor, and finally got pregnant at 38. I was very lucky, and was super excited to be pregnant with a beautiful little girl.
You know, when I think back to the early symptoms, when I was in the occupational medicine business, of course, we had doctors. I had a slight tremor in my thumb, and it was actually, you know, if I put my left thumb in a certain angle, there's a tremor, and otherwise there was nothing.
As a professional violinist, people would notice before me going on stage that my hands were shaking. And they would ask me, hey, am I nervous? And I would say not at all. And that's when I started realizing, hey, why am I shaking?
You know, during my pregnancy, I first started noticing that I had what I thought was carpal tunnel. My right hand wouldn't move very well. You know, I went to my psychiatrist, who I had been working with for a number of years. He knew me very well. I said, you know, yeah, they did these tests and I demonstrated the finger tapping, and he looked very alarmed. And I was like, that's not good. Why does he look so alarmed?
In the exam room waiting for the doctor, there was a poster on how to determine if someone has Parkinson's. And I went down that, and 6 out of 8 I had already, and the other ones are soon to come.
And so I went and I actually Googled all my symptoms, and all that came up was Parkinson's disease.
I knew my family has a history of what they call benign essential tremors, but usually at that time it was known that you either had one or the other. When I found this out in 2013 that I had Parkinson's, I was one of the anomalies that actually had both.
The doctor came in and said, how can I help you? I said, I have Parkinson's. And unfortunately, I was right.
You know, I was very depressed, as you can imagine one is, and when receiving a diagnosis like that, I was crying a lot, and my psychiatrist gave me some really good advice, which was basically like, your daughter doesn't know about this, and she needs you to be her mom. That's your job right now, is to be her mom. And so I really focused on that, and that meaning and purpose in my life is really, I think, what pulled me through those early days when it was really just such devastating news to find out.
After my self-diagnosis, my attempted diagnosis, the doctor confirmed the fact that it was Parkinson's. You know, I think the fact that I was reading the poster, it was much easier for me to accept, you know, rather than the doctor, you know, asking me questions. I realized that, you know, what was about to be a central part of my life was Parkinson's, but, you know, I was ready to do what needed to be done.
Tom essentially made the diagnosis himself after reading about the symptoms. Tom learned about the importance of exercise himself.
With very little research, it became apparent that exercise was important. My sister had told me that she had seen a news program with Leslie Stahl, whose husband had Parkinson's, and he was participating in rock-steady boxing. And once I found out about that, I started to look for it. You know, I kid the rock-steady people here that I was looking for them before they found me, Rocksteady Boxing was in Wilmington, I was by myself for 3 or 4 weeks, and then they started adding people.
General exercise, lifting weights. Nowadays, because I'm moving to my house and downsizing to an apartment as a result of my divorce, I am utilizing jugs of water and improvising. I've learned that it's very important to adapt. I don't want Parkinson's to beat me. I want to beat my Parkinson's.
My neurologist who diagnosed me said, take charge of your disease. Don't let it take charge of you. And that was the best advice I've ever gotten. I'm not sure that I would have wanted to have been diagnosed earlier in my journey, just because I don't think that I would have had my daughter in that case if I had known that I had Parkinson's.
Dr. Miller has some wonderful advice if you have Parkinson's disease. Gain control over Parkinson's so it doesn't control you. You can do this through at least 4 different ways. One is by learning as much as possible about the disease. Hopefully Parkinson's TV can help. 2, by exercising vigorously, ideally at least an hour a day if you can. Healthy diet, avoiding pesticides, and using filtered water. And 4, by surrounding yourself with a great care team.
Much like Rocksteady Boxing, I found out about Speak Out. Come to find out, I was the first one here who did Speak Out. It reminds me now that I should be speaking louder with intent. And also I can reach back if I find myself mumbling or my sentences tail off at the end. I can reach back to those exercises. It keeps me honest in terms of speech. Because speech is one of those things that goes.
My father introduced me to the sport of table tennis, again at the age of 4, because he knew at that time that I would need some form of physical activity given the physical restrictions I would have because of my heart condition. Table tennis was perfect because it's one of the few sports out there where you can tailor it to anything from competitiveness to recreational use, to people who are able-bodied versus people that are disabled, people young and old, gender, physical handicap, mental handicap. Whatever it is, you can tailor table tennis to be a good form of exercise.
One of the things I do once a week is play golf. And I used to play golf 3 or 4 times a week. I like to think that Parkinson's is the cause of me being such a bad golfer, but I've come to find out it's just I'm a bad golfer. Golf's nice because it's a communal thing. Even great golfers have terrible shots. So, I do play golf, but not very well.
Little did I realize that playing table tennis would have a profound impact on my Parkinson's. When my hands shake, putting that paddle in my hand and seeing my tremors stop. Being able to do that not only helped my tremors, but it absolutely improved my reflexes, being lightning quick.
What he experiences is that his reflexes have become better. His tremor is less thanks to table tennis. And I think this is hopefully a powerful incentive for all of you to pick up exercise as part of your daily regime to fight Parkinson's disease.
So I just recently had DBS in September of 2021. So prior to DBS, I really felt such steep peaks and troughs in terms of my symptoms. I'm still in the process of adjusting and turning up the stimulation to find the best possible effect and try and decrease some of my medications. But already I just feel that it's much more even. There's much more predictability in terms of how I'm going to be doing. There isn't this steep drop off. And I just have more confidence that if I make plans, I'll actually be able to follow through on them.
Deep brain stimulation has been well studied and can be quite effective for a subset of individuals who have Parkinson's disease, but it's not without its risks. Up to about 20% of people who have deep brain stimulation can have an adverse effect, such as an infection or suboptimal placement, and that can complicate the procedure. But if you've had Parkinson's disease, you're young, and our definition of young is under 75, you develop some complications from the medications, then you should talk to your physician about whether surgical treatments for Parkinson's disease might be appropriate for you.
Normally, Parkinson's, you would think that would end sports careers. I know other athletes with Parkinson's where that was the case, it ended their sports career. But guess what? I never got that memo. My athletic career began only after Parkinson's. To be a table tennis athlete representing our country, being the first ever medalist at the US Open for Parkinson's disease.
I have always been impressed how people with Parkinson's, after they heard those dreadful words, "You've got Parkinson's," fight back and bounce back up.
That goes to saying a lot that the power of the human spirit is such that even somebody like me with a history of heart and Parkinson's, we can still achieve our dreams.
There's a creative outlet that I really enjoy, which is photography. And I have found that people with Parkinson's, they become more creative. I capture nature in my photography. Flowers, you know, flowers are alive. They've got energy to them. There's a vibration to them. And they're beautiful, just like people with Parkinson's.
It's normal to think that, oh my God, this is the end of the world. This is over, my life is over. Newsflash, it is not over. As long as you continue to breathe, as long as you continue to have that heartbeat, this is only the beginning. Yes, it may be a tougher beginning, but it's a chance to still experience life and to adapt, to show yourself, to show the world that you are much stronger than you realize.
Advocate for yourself. Know that if you feel something's not right, that something needs to be addressed, that you find that answer and find the person that listens to you.
You need not suffer in silence. You need to make your voices heard. And if people aren't listening to you, find other clinicians or others that can provide you the care and support that you need.
I would definitely encourage anybody who's young, who's experiencing any type of any symptom, to be very diligent, be very aggressive with, your documenting your symptoms. Put on your armor, go in, tell the doctor what's going on, and don't stop until you get an answer.
If it is really Parkinson's, then search things about it and learn from other people and ask them about their experience.
Help improve access to medication.
Everything I possibly can learn or I can do, I do.
Research, trials critically depend on your volunteer time, on your participation. So this is an urgent call to all of you living with Parkinson's disease.
Parkinson's, the book, Dr. Dorsey's book, is the first step in taking all those things, all the aspects of the disease and the causes, and putting them together in something that you can look at and say, holy cow.
Listening to the voice of the person who has the lived experience with the illness is so, so important, and we learn new things all the time.
We, with the disease, need to make our voices heard, just like with Mothers Against Drunk Driving or those that had HIV.
In the fight against cancer, in the fight against heart disease. Everyone sees that as something that could possibly affect them. And so they want to fight that. They want to put their resources to it. And you have able-bodied people who are willing to do that. A fight against Parkinson's has to be a whole community that fights against it. Because I believe that people are unaware how close that disease is to knocking on their own door.
It's interesting. I get a lot of people who approach me because I'm the president of the PD Avengers going, what can I do? And I turn it around on them and go, what can you do? What can you add to the community? How can you make a difference? Because we all can do it. We all have something. It doesn't matter what it is. How do you apply it? How do you make it matter? Do something. We need you.
Take a step back, look around.